everyone, it's Art with Anderson. Today I thought we'd take a little bit of a break from some of the longer and more serious posts that I've been making on these, very intense, even more than I anticipated, watercolor paintings. But today, like I said, we're going to take a break, keep it fun with some sketches of one of my favorite Spongebob characters, and that is, of course, Patrick. This one's going to be a little bit more straightforward. I'm going to leave the coloring to you, but we'll be talking about a few different poses. And let me just pull up some of those pictures on the screen. But while I do that, the one thing I want you guys to keep in mind while we are thinking of new designs, anytime you're drawing, it's always easy to get overwhelmed with the details. We are going to be starting off with a very simple approach to this, and that's to break it down into some basic shapes. And even though you might think of Patrick, who's a starfish, as somebody that is a star shape, ironically there's much more soft forms in there, and we're going to be using a lot of circles to start off. So I'm going to pull up this picture real quick here, and we're going to be using that as our guide to draw along. Now you might notice that I have this circle on here already. So I have a new setup today, so I'm kind of getting used to that as well. Because after I've been sitting for a long time drawing, it can be really hard on your shoulders and neck as you kind of dangle your head over a drawing. So it's always important to, number one, keep good lighting in your drawing space. And then if you notice yourself getting a little stiff, make sure you get up and walk around. So we're going to start off with this circle, and I want you to kind of look over here at his abdomen. That's going to be the central mass, or the main body that we're going to be building off of. But what I want to challenge you to do is, instead of thinking of the points of the star, I want you to think of like the end of the star, where that would be in relationship. So let's find a central point on his body. I would say that's kind of the belly button. And it's not right in the middle of that circle. It's kind of off to the right. We're just putting a point right here. That's kind of a reference for his head, okay? And instead of drawing a star, I'm going to draw a line that kind of goes from his belly button. I want you to imagine it up to the top. So I'm just going up, and I'm leaning it back a little bit. Now that's going to be our center line. And then for his arms in this pose, they do go straight out, but you notice how his arm kind of swishes up to the side. He's almost lifting up. But instead of using the belly button for this point, we will use kind of the center of the circle. So think of these as kind of the bones, even though I don't think starfish have bones. We're just kind of getting the path that this star arm will find. Same thing over here. It's going to kind of come off to the side. If it's not perfect, no worries. But this is, constructing your drawing. But it's going to really help you with your proportions as you move on, because we're going to use some other shapes to really sharpen these things up. Now for his legs, they're much shorter and they're much more vertical. So I'm going to be drawing some vertical lines, but I want you to imagine, here's the base of his body. You can kind of see that in his shorts, right? There's a line here. Well, I'm going to focus on that gap in between. I'm just going to put a little gap in here, make some markers. And then on the outside, that's going to be where I kind of create this area for that, almost like that pants on the shorts, right? And then I'm just going to put two of those bones down here. They're kind of vertical. But one other thing I want to point out is both of his legs are not the same length. If you see how at the bottom here, okay, there's a little bit of gap in white there, whereas this one goes all the way to the bottom. That's giving the impression that the body is turned in space. He's not just facing us. And that's why you have this belly button off to the side. So I'm going to start off by thinking, here's the base of this foot, and then I'm going to lift this one up a little bit. I have this little squiggly here from earlier. All right. So this might not look much like a sponge, but what we have is a skeleton that you can work from. And that's going to be a really great place for us to start adding some of the rounder forms at the end, instead of focusing on a point of the star. So I'm going to be putting a little ball up here at the end of this little stick. All right, same thing over here. And I'm using a pencil here because these are obviously going to get erased. And another way to check, like, man, did I get this the right length compared to this one? Is take your pencil and kind of hold it up to the drawing and get the angle. So I don't know if you can see this. I'm touching each tip here and I'm taking that angle. It looks like I got it on this case, right? That the angle between these two is the same as it is in the drawing. Same thing for the top. Did we get that one right? Let's see. It's about this angle here. It looks like we did. So that's another way that you can kind of map out your proportions, because no artist is just going at it on his own just to get this here. Now I want you to ignore the arms for a minute. We're just going to be focusing on this body shape. And since we have this tilt backwards, okay, I want you to look at the front, or this edge of the form, right? It kind of comes around from his tummy here, and it kind of scoots back and blends with this circle over here. That circle is kind of like the end point. But when I say blended, it's what we call a tangent. So I've talked about this in previous videos. If I have a circle, the line doesn't go through the circle. It actually touches at the edge, right? It almost blends in with this whole curve. All right. So let's do the backside. Now, there's this little, instead of just coming to an end and going straight down, kind of comes in a little bit, and it's easier just to focus on one line at a time. So we're going down here and then blending back into that circle that I had over here. Now, you'll notice that that line goes behind this arm right here. The arm is going to overlap, and that's really important to get for our purposes. Now I'm looking a little bit more at this arm. I think it's maybe a little bit over here. This seems like it shoots a little bit more straight up. And that's nice. I don't have to erase a bunch of stuff. I got my angles all correct before I had to erase like everything else. If I had started, I would have had to erase my whole outline of this character. Another way to check it would be to see, like, okay, are both of these the same height? It looks like they are in the drawing. Let's hold my pen up there. Looks like they're about the same height. So once you have your targets defined, it's a lot easier to hit them. All right. Now we've defined this main form. Right? That is going to get the main body chunk. And try to get that as smooth as possible. We're going to go over this with marker once we're really confident in our lines. And I can start to erase this part of the form. So that was that part of the circle that I used to guide it together. Now let's go with some of the other shapes. Okay. Now I'm not worrying about the overlap right now, but I'm just trying to blend it into that circle at the end so it's nice and sharp, or sorry, smooth, I should say. And deciding how wide it is at where it attaches. Same thing over here. This one has much straighter lines, but it does blend in with that circle at the end of our stick there. See how I'm overlapping that line a little bit? It overlaps with the body shape. Now, we've used this idea in several other videos, but it helps us create a sense of depth, like something is closer to us versus farther away. A lot of people think you have to use very fancy methods to capture 3D, but this is one that we'll be talking about. Overlapping lines is a very simple way, especially that cartoonists take advantage of, to show that somebody is a little bit more 3D than just a flat shape. All right, let's go down to his feet. These are a little bit more narrow, so I'm going to kind of make them down like this, but we know where they end. We've done all the hard proportion work, so I can just focus on making a nice line. And remember, his shorts here, this is a great opportunity to look at those, is they kind of come across here with a parenthesis shape. When I say parentheses, I'm talking like a curve like this. You know, if you ever put words in parentheses. We give a round shape, so those shorts follow around the round shape of his body. All right, so quite a bit of stuff going on, but we're going to put one other major parentheses in there. Since we started off with the location of the belly button, right, it's slightly off to the right, and a little bit lower than the center. Just below there, I'm going to make a mark. That's going to be the pant line. And I'm going to try to create like a parentheses or an arch that gives the illusion that he's nice and round. That's going to be the pants line. If you were to draw it flat, it wouldn't look like Patrick is a 3D shape. He definitely has some volume. He's a chubby dude, right? So now that we have the basic lines here, we can start doing a few of those overlap things and cleaning up our form. First, I'm going to erase those circles, what's left over. So that way I can see where the arms, leg, and head end. Doesn't have to be too precise just yet. Next, I'm going to leave this central line here, okay? We'll talk about that later. But I'm going to erase the central line we used to locate where those arms are, so we don't have those sticks interfering. Okay, now we're going to move on to the part where we're deciding where lines overlap. But we're going to start off with this arm right here. Okay, so if the arm is in front of where you can see like maybe the back, I think this is the backbone line. Here's the arm. They come in front of that. So to give that illusion, we have to be sure that these lines slightly overlap that, not too far, but then erase this section of that backbone line so we can give the illusion that this is in front, because we can't see through the arm. We wouldn't be able to see that line that's arching in the back. But what's cool about our brain combined with our eyes is we actually imagine that line. We don't worry that that disappears because we can understand it. Our brain is very good at connecting invisible lines, or what they call implied lines. Even if they kind of go behind an object, we predict that it'll kind of be smooth. So making sure you draw that line first guarantees that your brain doesn't be like, oh, well, this one is slightly off. Is something happening on his back? That's really important. That's why we take the time to draw the main form out beforehand. I'm also noticing that I think his backside is a little bit bigger, so I might do another line just to give him a little bit more weight back here, and then I can make that adjustment in the same way. I'm still in the stage of drawing pretty lightly because I know these adjustments happen. Now, the question of his face, okay? His face we're going to get to. Actually, I just realized we have a little bit more overlap to do, okay? And that's the shorts. Look carefully. On the left leg, it does just follow it, but we can't see the the leg underneath that pant leg. All right, so here's our line. And it just goes straight down. It does our parentheses kind of curve here. And it goes straight back up, but this line goes a little bit higher than where the bottom goes. And that line actually connects to his stomach. The other leg appears to be farther back, and that's how we get the illusion that this pant leg is kind of slightly obstructed by his belly. And so doing some cleanup there will help you see that effect. Right? And it's not perfectly round right here, but you're starting to get that idea. Oh yeah, and then on this arm, you can see the belly is getting in front of here. That means we need to be careful to erase the arm because you wouldn't be able to see where that arm attaches, you know, like his armpit or whatever. Now we're basically there with the form, and you notice that I left this central line down here to get, because it started from the belly button and went up here. What that does is, he's not facing us directly. We're seeing him from slightly on the side. And when that's the case, you definitely want to, keep that in mind when you're placing some of the features here, because I'm looking at his eyes. Where do they come together? Like imagine like this arch, like this. You know, it's like a seagull in a cheesy painting, or, you know, a butt crack. So that top little butt crack area, first of all, how high is it? Now, what I'm using as a visual reference, if you look on the screen with my pencil, I'm laying it across where the arms are. The top of that is just above, if I were to draw an invisible line here, the top of his eyes meet somewhere right there, but the little butt crack area meets on that center line. So I'm just going to draw that little shape. I know that that's where the top of the eyes are. Now, how about the bottom of those eyes? Let's see where they line up. I think they're slightly, you know, it's kind of hard for me to do, but I'm guessing they're slightly below where the hands are. So they're going to end up right about here. The other thing is that we can't just draw an oval straight up and down. Because his head is leaning back, we actually need to angle it back a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just kind of almost draw a box in here, dividing up where the eyes are. His eye actually goes outside of his head over here. So I'm drawing an angle that's the same angle as this, or parallel with the front of that body. So it almost appears that he's tipping back his expression. Now that line, if we go down farther, we want to decide this mouth here. Now the mouth isn't, you know, a perfect smiley face, right? It's not like this where we're looking head on. Not only is it open, but we're actually looking at it from the side. And there's some cool overlapping things that we can do. But it's made out of a couple parentheses shapes. Nothing too difficult for us to work on here. So, thing is, I'm going to start off with the top line. Now, what's cool about it is if you look at where we drew our arm here, I kind of imagine that line connecting here and swooping up. The top line of that mouth. So it's very similar to the curve that we created there. All right. And then the bottom one, if this is the edge of my eye here, it's slightly to the left of that. So it's starting, and it's just another scoop like this. Kind of scoops back up towards the end. If you make it too long, you can obviously trim that up. But what I'm going to focus on here is getting that angle pretty similar. Okay, and find out where it's going to stop, which is pretty close to the edge. We're going to do some overlap effects with this. We'll just do this one right here. How do we connect? Like, if what's going on with this one? So see how the line continues a little farther out from each? I'm going to do another parentheses kind of breaking in this way. If you think about what's going on, is that this is almost his lip when you think about it. It goes a little bit past. There's some overlapping. So we're seeing, like, this would almost be his top lip. If you can imagine it coming out, it's almost blocking the view. But the artist chose not to draw that line because it's all the same color. So that's a very interesting overlap. And then we have this kind of classic dimple or corner of the mouth right there. And we're kind of on the home stretch. But I think I forgot this on when I did Spongebob in one of my earlier drawings, was to put the eyelashes in, or eyebrows. So let's take a look at the angle of those things. They're obviously on each side of that center line, and they're almost like a Z shape if you look closely. Right? They're a little bit thicker, but I'm just going to put a Z, but first I want to get the angles right. So I'm kind of tipping the angles up, and this one actually goes out a little over the edge there. So I'm just going to put a little Z right there. Okay. All right. Now what do we got next? Let's focus on the eyes. Now there's definitely some overlap going on. So this eye that's closer to us is overlapping the second eye. So we're going to draw that one first. Try to get it inside that rectangle that we made. There's one nice oval eyeball. And if you can, try to draw that as a full oval. You can erase later because it almost intersects like a Venn diagram. But notice that the eye actually pops out. So here's the body, right? It goes past the edge of the character, right? That's kind of unique, but it's pretty common for cartoons. Your eyes are really emphasized. So I'm erasing where it overlaps and getting rid of some of these lines where it's confusing. And since I drew those construction lines a little bit more delicately, a little bit lighter, it's a lot easier to get rid of them. So I'm erasing now this center line, but that was very helpful because otherwise I probably would have drawn the eyes in the center of this shape. So I can kind of clear up some of those, and now we're on to really refining this. The first step to refining that is to be adding the actual pupils. Now they are relatively in the center. They're little black ovals, but this one seems a little bit closer to that edge. So now he looks pretty much alive, but we didn't add the tongue. Now the tongue, I love doing these. Definitely back to the parentheses shapes. Okay, we're going to do one that just has the general shape of the tongue. It's kind of at the bottom half of the mouth, right? And then we're going to put this little line in there, like a smaller parentheses. That's that line down the middle of the tongue. That gives us the illusion that his mouth is open. All right, so now this is the point that gets a little bit more into the details. You've done very good at just focusing on the basics while you work on this. But the thing is, now we get to really make the final decisions because I want to be putting this thing into drawing it in pen. Now, the other thing that I'm noticing, just so we don't get carried away, look at the outline of Patrick's upper body and legs and arms versus the outline of those shorts. Outline of the shorts is in black, right? But his body is just a darker pink. Now, I don't have that set up for you to demonstrate, but it's something to just keep an eye on. Not all outlines are done in black, but it definitely is a nice outline. But let's get the character of that line just right. So, remember, I made a few adjustments as I went on. So now I'm just going to basically think of the line on the outside as like a racetrack. I'm a race car driver trying to get the curve right. So I'm going to start at the top. Look at the top here. He almost has this shaved off here. It's not perfectly round. So I'm just going to shave that off. Right? You're taking a little bit tighter corner. And maybe this top part is a little bit straighter than I have it. It's not as round. That might seem a little bit obsessive to get this detailed in here, but you know, sometimes taking the time to really notice this stuff is really what brings the character to life. So I'm just kind of spicing this up. And this gives us a chance to make sure that we didn't miss any lines that we want to erase, but don't focus too much on erasing. It's more just committing to a line. Now this arm here looks a little bit too flabby, like it's too thick, so I'm just going to trim a little bit off. So while we're kind of doing this, I want you guys to start thinking about, first of all, if you had to be an animator on this show, you'd be doing this a lot because every second of footage typically takes about 24 drawings done by an artist. Now the computer can speed up some of that, but can you imagine having to do 24 drawings per second of an episode? If an episode is, say, 20 minutes long, that's 24. Let's see. So for every second, that's 60 times 24 times 20, right? That's a lot of drawings. If that math is wrong, I'm sorry. I'm trying to do a creative thing plus do math at the same time. A little bit tough. All right, here we go. So I like where this is headed. We didn't really deal with the pants there, and there's a little pattern that we'll have to come up with. And then our belly button. See, this is why you go through your drawing and commit to those lines, because you may have realized you totally forgot. Okay, the belly button is kind of fun. It's like, I'll draw it over here. It's a upside down parentheses, and then another one that's slightly curved. Right? That's what's so cool about art is it's almost like its own language. You can get away with like slang. It's like shorthand. You don't have to draw every single detail because the brain actually fills it in. I mean, you could say that the brain is really intelligent, but the other part of it that's absurd is like, why would we ever sit down and listen to a talking sea creature, right? It doesn't happen in reality, but for some reason, we can get into it. And if you're wondering why I'm drawing SpongeBob characters, it's because since I've been home, like the TV is just like on, and like there's literally so much SpongeBob on during the day that I feel like I'm like coming home from grade school or something or whatever, and just like turning the TV on and you just hear it in the background. Okay. Anyway, enough blather. Let's get on to these shorts. All right, so I'm gonna just reaffirm this line here. It's not perfectly straight in this drawing. It doesn't have to be. And then I'm gonna put another band in there, but I'm gonna just clean this up so it's not as intense. And we're just making a parallel line. That's kind of his waistband. If you're wondering how I'm making such a smooth line, I'm bracing my hand against the table here. I'm trying to do it in one shot where possible, but I'm keeping that curve, right? Keeping his belly round. That's important. All right, now, the pattern on his shorts, okay? We don't see the full thing, and it's technically one of those like Hawaiian flowers. So let's just break it down. First off, though, I want you to see the major form in there, and that's a part of a circle, right? So it's underneath his belly button, and I'm going to lightly sketch this arc, or what would be a circle. If you want to do the full circle, you can. Same thing over here. There's like a circle. Think of it as like a polka dot. And we're going to use what we call negative space to carve in there. So we have like those little flower petals. And all we got to do, we have most of the shape drawn. I'm just going to just bring in a little thing here and a little thing here. So it points towards the center. And then I can go back in and kind of do that. But that gives the eye something to focus on. It sees that curve, right? Sometimes there's a little bit of a change, but use those big shapes to do the heavy lifting, and then you can go back in and tweak it. The difference between, you know, a aspiring artist and maybe a professional or really, you know, accomplished one is that they practice the fundamentals. It's like your, you know, basketball or baseball coach telling you to practice the fundamentals. Everybody wants to start off doing a slam dunk, right? Nobody wants to do, you know, 100 free throws a day. They want to be the big star. No pun intended. This is a pretty big star, if you know what I'm saying. All right, let's see. So we got quite a bit of detail here. Notice that he has these kind of speckles on here. I'm not going to draw those in just yet, but if I'm just going to go one time through. It looks like this overlap here is a little bit too long. I'm going to just get that out of the way. I feel like my mouth could be a little bit bigger even. I'm going to expand it a little bit. So I'm just taking that here. I might even make this eye a little bigger. Remember, it's all about what you decide to do. So have some fun with it. You know, and then obviously you can start with this and then try to do some of Patrick's other expressions. I don't even know if that made it better or worse, but that's kind of part of the game, right? Okay. So now that I have this pretty much all set up, and I'm not going to worry too much about erasing entirely because I'm going to go back in with a pen. I have these kind of fine tip markers here. And this is these are Prismacolor markers, but they're fine tipped. They're really cool. They're a little more pricey. Some people use what's called micron pens. But if you don't have that, you can use a black pen. I think I have one over here. These are kind of nice for finalizing your lines. It does kind of take some practice to get them nice and smooth. So we'll see what we can do here. And try this out. So I'm going to try this one. And I'm going to just start with doing his shorts here. And I'm noticing in the drawing, you can see it's not perfectly straight. So I'm just going to kind of be confident with my lines, but pay attention. Kind of be that racetrack driver again. And follow the course of this line. Just be sure if you're doing this, since it's permanent, you want to get those lines right the first time. And then after the ink dries, you can erase underneath, which is kind of fun. And you can get that nice clean image. It's a lot easier when you're inking to be able to rotate your paper. Since I have this on an easel right now, it's a little harder, but that's another way. If you have shaky hands, draw towards yourself is the most stable position. You have the most control over your lines. Okay. Now I think I have a little bit thicker one for this top line. I'm going to try to do that. The other trick with marker is that if you hold it in one place for too long, sometimes it can bleed. Especially if you're using certain types of paper. See, I kind of doubled that one up. But I wanted to make this one a little bit thicker anyway. Again, if I wasn't on an easel right now, I would definitely be turning my paper. Darken this up. Actually, I might actually be able to turn this easel a little bit. Okay, that's actually kind of nice. I'm going to try to get some of these other designs in. Oh, we got to do that second line. You don't have to get too obsessive over this. Remember, it's a cartoon. But if you're confident with your lines, you're going to be happier with the result. Just go for it. Commit. It'll be a lot easier. Okay, here's our little belly button. Another thing is, depending on your marker and the type of paper you have, try to get out of the habit. Like, if you're a right-handed person, start from the left side. So that way your hand doesn't smudge this stuff, especially if you're depending on putting your hand down. So I'll try to abide by that idea if I can. Looks like we're making some good progress on this stuff. Honestly, this is the most relaxing one I've done. So if you guys are down to draw more cartoon characters, definitely in the chat or in the comments, give me some suggestions of characters you'd like to see. Maybe it's from a video game you've been playing. It's definitely easier to get the job done in like an actual, hour or less, because those other paintings I was doing are definitely like something I'd normally spend several days on. Okay, now we're kind of left with some of our other details here. That would be the mouth. So I got to commit to this line. This is kind of a... I'll have to work on this easel design. I took an old photographer's tripod and turned it into my drawing and painting easel. So maybe I'll have to figure it out so I can actually turn it all the time. That would be great. All right. Okay, I got my tongue. Now these ovals. Let's see if how precise we can get those. Pretty good. If you're trying to do this with a thicker marker and you don't like how thick the lines are, one solution to that is to draw larger, right? So the lines are, in comparison, not as bad, of a proportion mess. But the other thing is try to keep your movements quick so you don't get as much bleeding through that paper. All right, now I'm going to just fill in these eyes. Looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit bigger on this one. And then I'm going to put in these eyebrows. Now, I might have made them a little bit too long. I definitely like this Z shape that comes off of this thing slightly. So you definitely see that. So I'm really liking this right now. And this is a pretty flat version of it. And we'll give it a few seconds to let some of those areas dry. And then I'm going to start working it over with an eraser just to kind of clean up some of those looks. Let's see, I got to find the cap for my marker. Now I'm going to try starting off with what's called a kneaded eraser. So this is actually, it looks like silly putty. But what's really cool is that you can, instead of just rubbing over something, you can actually, since it's sticky, you can kind of pull off some of the pencil. You can still kind of rub it on there, but it seems to be a little bit more gentle than, a regular eraser, which, if you get over eager, you can really crunch up your paper if you weren't planning on it. That's kind of frustrating. But you want to make sure that your ink is dry before you, start messing with this. But you're going to be amazed how clean you can get it. And this would be perfect, if you wanted to start coloring this thing. Now, you don't have to use regular materials. A lot of artists work with computers, so they would take a drawing like this if they like drawing on paper and getting that pen and ink going. Another way to do that would be just snap a photo or scan it in, which I do a lot. Thanks so much, guys. Joe, Elizabeth, and Kate, thank you. Doug from the 90s would be a really great cartoon series to do. I always remember Skeeter and what's that? There was always that guy on there. I forget his name. But, oh yeah, Patrick is a goofy goober. So yeah, Doug would be really fun though. I'm like having a rush of nostalgia. I don't know. The other one we were laughing about the other day was Dragon Tales. Those, like for some reason, even though I'm like too old, my younger brother would always have that like PBS on, wanting to watch Arthur. Maybe we could do a series on Arthur and DW and all that. But I just remember Dragon Tales was There's something about like that Zach and Wheezy, that really high pitched voice, you know. Love it. Oh my god. We were laughing the other night talking about some of those old PBS shows, and now that everyone is doing Zoom meetings, or that you know, that Zoom show on PBS was pretty wild if you were old enough to remember. Oh yeah,